Hey everyone, this is Samantha, and this video is actually going to be a little bit on the controversial side. There's a lot of exceptions to consider in it. Today we're going to be talking about the glass door principle, and the glass door principle has a lot of different communities involved, from the non-binary trans community to the binary trans community, also including the feminism community, especially TERF-related communities. And there's just a lot of heated debate in this that's not necessarily resolved around an answer of be inclusive, but more so around exceptions. To start talking about the glass door concept, we have to kind of start at the very beginning, being in feminism. Now, feminism, in definition, is primarily about women and men being of equal standing. And ever since the feminist movement started in like 1980s, there's been a lot of push for female and women equality. We're still looking at anywhere between 80 to 90 cents on the dollar for every dollar that a man makes, which is definitely a problem, and it's not equal, and that obviously needs to be fixed. So we start looking at a lot of feminists who move into colleges that are all female colleges, where your leadership, where every single person that has authority is female. And that just flies in the face of this entire patriarchal world, and it does contribute to feminism. It contributes to equality, but there have been a lot of changes in feminism that kind of blur the lines, especially when it comes to female collegiate environments. Further, there's also the trans community, which needs to be considered in this issue, primarily because the trans community seems to have this split that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. But honestly, it's a little bit of a generational gap. We have the binary trans community, which are individuals who fit in the binary, and the binary trans community essentially states that currently the cultural mores is a binary system. We have males and we have females, and many people who are trans should be falling in line with either one of those two. You could be a feminine male, or you could be a masculine female, and you can be a trans male and a trans female in any regard, but you still have to fit inside the binary. And fighting to destroy that binary is just not yet something that society is ready to handle. On the other end of this line, you have the non-binary trans community. This includes people who are genderqueer, third gender, agender, all of these different genders that are outside of the gender binary. And our contention, I'm aligning myself with this particular community, mostly because this is the opinion that I side with, is that the gender binary is actually hurting not just the LGBT and transgender and intersex movements more specifically, but it's also hurting feminism. It's hurting men and it's hurting women in our society, and feminism seems to agree. For instance, men are being forced to carry a certain bodily image. If they're not bodybuilding or weightlifting, if they don't like cars or sports, then they're not, quote, real men. And on the other side, if women, 1, aren't skinny, 2, aren't fashionable, 3, don't wear makeup, or 4, don't care at all about their looks, then they're not completely female. This is obviously an issue that's a problem, and it is perpetuated by the gender binary. So it stands to assume that the non-binary trans community would want to be a part of this feminism. Last community we're going to talk about, this is called a TERF, and TERF is actually being seen as a bit of a slang term, especially a slur for these specific people, but I don't necessarily know what they actually want to be called, so I'm just going to keep on that, and I do certainly apologize if I offend anyone. Let me know down in the comments what it's actually called. A TERF is a trans exclusionary radical feminist, and this doesn't mean that they're actually radical, as in like go burn down the churches of the patriarchy, but more along the lines of people who believe in feminism to the greatest and biggest extent, so much so that they're willing to take action to exclude other communities from being in there, specifically the trans community. And this is where the glass door principle comes into play. The definition of the glass door principle is essentially that trans individuals, people outside of the gender binary, are excluded in places where they otherwise should be. This happens most often in dating. So when you have a lesbian who is into girls, and then you have a trans woman who is, in all of her rights, trans, definitely post-op or whatever, wants to be considered a full woman, and this lesbian does not accept her as such, and prevents her from dating or in general being a part of the quote lesbian community, despite the fact that that's the sexuality that that trans person maintains. This video is actually being done for a friend who's talking about a lot of these glass door principles, and I'm going to bring up the example of the collegiate environment because that's actually an article she gave me. In a collegiate environment with an all-women's college, for instance, there have been several women's colleges who have accepted women with an F on their ID or license, and while they are in school at this all-women's college, they transition to become men. They find that this environment with women is still a little bit more safe, and it's definitely something they still identify with. There's a level of culture and community that needs to be considered, not just gender lines. So when it comes to a trans man coming into these colleges, a lot of these students in these all-women colleges find that to be flying in the face of feminism. Is that really something that we should be doing? Because of the complexity of this situation, I want to stay away from my personal opinion necessarily and just talk about both sides. I have experienced, in many cases, going to a co-ed college as a trans woman, a lot of issues with potty panic. Basically, I'm not allowed in the female restroom because I'm a trans woman and my genitalia would automatically indicate that I was male. That's not the case anymore, and I definitely pass as a woman, so it's dangerous even for me to go into a male bathroom. I obviously can't be in the male bathroom. Females don't want me in the female bathroom. Where am I to go? And the collegiate environment, honestly, can be a larger version of that. And further, on the opposite side, what if these men, being the only men on campus, for a lot of lesbians, just suddenly become, quote, the safe choice? It's a trans man, I'm straight or bi, and I kind of have feelings for women, so I'll date this trans man because they're safe. And they start becoming glorified in that environment. I'd like to go ahead and just do a second video on my specific opinion, which you can find down below, but otherwise, I'd love to hear all of yours. If you liked this video or you would like to continue speaking with us, these are the exact same situations that we do on Trans Youth Channel, which you can subscribe to right here. Definitely just load a comment down below and I will respond to them.